The Miami morning hummed with life, sunlight streaming through the wide windows of Kaitlyn Grace's sleek, modern kitchen. At 38, Kaitlyn was a celebrated interior designer whose bold, elegant designs adorned some of the city's most luxurious homes. But today, as she poured her coffee with deliberate care, her mind wasn't on her latest project. It churned with the weight of the day ahead, a high-stakes client presentation, her 12-year-old son Lucas's school recital, and the inevitable family dinner at her parents' sprawling estate in Palm Beach. She sighed, her breath fogging the rim of her mug. "Mom's going to fawn over Sophie again, and Lucas will be invisible," she muttered, the words sharp with frustration. Her husband, Ethan, a 40-year-old software developer with a quiet strength and a knack for reading her moods, descended the stairs. His dark hair was still damp from the shower, and his warm brown eyes softened as they met hers. "Good morning, love," he said, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You're already lost in thought. It's about your parents, isn't it?" Kaitlyn offered a tight smile, her fingers tightening around the mug. "It's always about them," she admitted. "I can handle their favoritism toward Mia, but it's killing me to see Lucas hurt." Kaitlyn had built a name for herself in Miami's competitive design world. Her work featured in glossy magazines and her firm's portfolio shaping the city's skyline. Yet her relationship with her parents, Eleanor and Richard Blake, was a tangle of unresolved tension. Eleanor, a 62-year-old retired socialite with a commanding presence, and Richard, a 65-year-old former investment banker, doted endlessly on Kaitlyn's younger sister, Mia, and her 10-year-old daughter, Sophie. Lucas, with his sensitive soul and prodigious talent for piano, was perpetually overlooked, his achievements dismissed or ignored. The unfairness had simmered for years, but lately, Kaitlyn had noticed the toll it was taking on her son. As if on cue, Lucas bounded into the kitchen, his backpack slung over one shoulder and a sheaf of sheet music clutched in his hand. His hazel eyes sparkled with excitement, his tousled brown hair falling into his face. "Mom, I'm playing a solo at the recital today," he announced, holding up the pages. "It's Chopin, and Mr. Torres says it's my best piece yet. Do you think Grandma and Grandpa will come?" His voice was hopeful, but there was a flicker of doubt in his expression, a shadow Kaitlyn recognized all too well. She knelt to his level, brushing his hair back. "It's going to be amazing, Lucas," she said, forcing brightness into her tone. "I'm sure they'll try to make it." But her heart sank. She knew Eleanor and Richard were more likely to be engrossed in Sophie's latest ballet video than to show up for Lucas. Ethan poured himself a coffee and joined them, his presence a steady anchor. "You'll blow them away, kiddo," he said, ruffling Lucas's hair. "Just focus on your music." Lucas grinned, but Kaitlyn caught the way his shoulders slumped slightly, as if he already sensed the disappointment to come. She stood, her jaw tightening. "I need to get to the office," she said, kissing Lucas's forehead. "We'll be there tonight, cheering you on." The day unfolded in a blur of activity. Kaitlyn's presentation at her firm went flawlessly, her innovative design for a beachfront condo earning enthusiastic applause from the client. But her mind kept drifting to Lucas, to the recital, to the family dinner looming like a storm cloud. By late afternoon, she and Ethan arrived at Lucas's school, a vibrant arts academy in Coconut Grove. The auditorium buzzed with parents and students, the air thick with anticipation. Kaitlyn scanned the crowd, her heart sinking when she spotted Eleanor and Richard in the back row, their heads bent over Eleanor's phone. She didn't need to guess what they were watching. Lucas took the stage, his small frame poised at the grand piano. The room fell silent as his fingers danced across the keys, weaving Chopin's delicate, haunting melody. Kaitlyn's chest swelled with pride, her eyes misting as the notes filled the space, each one a testament to Lucas's talent and dedication. The audience erupted in applause when he finished, but Kaitlyn's gaze flicked to her parents. Eleanor was still scrolling, Richard nodding absently. They hadn't even looked up. After the recital, Lucas ran to Kaitlyn and Ethan, his face alight. "Did you see? I didn't miss a single note." Kaitlyn pulled him into a hug, her voice thick. "You were incredible, sweetheart." But as they approached Eleanor and Richard, Lucas's excitement dimmed. "Grandma, Grandpa, what did you think?" he asked, his voice small. Eleanor glanced up, startled. "Oh, Lucas, it was lovely," she said vaguely, her eyes darting back to her phone. "But you should see Sophie's new ballet routine. She's a natural." Richard chuckled, patting Lucas's shoulder. "Good job, kid," he said, already turning to Eleanor. "Show me that video again." Kaitlyn felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. Lucas's face fell, his earlier joy replaced by a quiet resignation that broke her heart. In the car on the way home, He stared out the window, his sheet music crumpled in his lap. They didn't even listen, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Ethan reached back, squeezing Lucas's knee. We heard you, buddy. You were the star. But Kaitlyn's hands gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She couldn't keep shielding Lucas from this pain. Something had to change. That evening, as Kaitlyn prepared for the family dinner, her resolve hardened. She stood in her bedroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror, her dark blue dress a stark contrast to the fire in her eyes. Ethan appeared behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. You okay? He asked. She turned, her voice steady but fierce. No, I'm done watching Lucas suffer. Tonight, I'm going to confront them. Ethan nodded, his expression mirroring her determination. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. As they drove to Palm Beach, the glittering lights of Miami fading into the distance, Kaitlyn felt a shift inside her. This wasn't just about one recital or one burnt steak. It was about years of neglect, of her son being made to feel less than. She glanced at Lucas in the back seat, his headphones on, lost in his music. This ends now, she whispered to herself. The dinner would be more than a family gathering. It would be the moment she took a stand. The palm-lined streets of Palm Beach glowed under the soft evening light as Kaitlyn Grace, Ethan, and Lucas pulled up to the Blake family estate. The sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion, with its arched windows and manicured gardens, was a monument to Eleanor and Richard Blake's wealth and status. But for Kaitlyn, it was a place of bittersweet memories, childhood laughter mixed with years of feeling overshadowed by her younger sister, Mia. Tonight, the familiar knot in her stomach tightened as she braced for the family dinner, her resolve to confront her parents burning brighter with every step toward the front door. Lucas clutched his sheet music, his earlier excitement from the recital dulled but not extinguished. Maybe Grandma will want to hear about my solo, he said, his voice tinged with hope. Kaitlyn forced a smile, her heart aching. Maybe, sweetheart, she replied, exchanging a glance with Ethan. His steady gaze told her he was ready to back her up, no matter what unfolded. They stepped into the foyer, where the scent of grilled meat and jasmine from the garden filled the air. The dining area, set in the lush backyard, buzzed with relatives, their chatter mingling with the clink of wine glasses. Eleanor Blake, elegant in a cream silk dress, held court at the center of the gathering, her 62-year-old frame radiating authority. She was fussing over Mia's 10-year-old daughter, Sophie, tying a sparkly hairpin in her golden curls. You're going to steal the show at your ballet recital, darling, Eleanor cooed, oblivious to Kaitlyn's arrival. Richard, 65, stood at the massive grill, his silver hair catching the light as he flipped steaks with theatrical flair. Mia, 30, and her husband, David, a 32-year-old realtor with a salesman's charm, hovered nearby, basking in the attention. The scene was painfully familiar. Sophie as the golden child, Mia's family at the heart of it all, and Lucas relegated to the sidelines. Kaitlyn, you made it, Richard called, waving a spatula. His smile was warm but fleeting, his focus quickly returning to David, who was pitching him on a new real estate venture. Kaitlyn set her homemade citrus salad on the table, ignoring Eleanor's dismissive glance. Another salad? Eleanor said, her tone clipped. You could have tried something more exciting, dear. Kaitlyn bit back a retort, her fingers curling into fists. She guided Lucas to a seat, whispering, Stay strong, okay? You're amazing, no matter what. As the evening unfolded, the favoritism became unbearable. Eleanor played a video of Sophie's ballet practice on her phone, passing it around to oohs and ahs from relatives. She's a prodigy, Eleanor declared, barely glancing at Lucas, who sat quietly, his sheet music untouched beside his plate. Mia chimed in. Her teacher says she could go professional. David nodded eagerly, ever the dutiful son-in-law. Lucas shifted in his seat, his small frame shrinking under the weight of being ignored. Kaitlyn's chest tightened, her anger simmering as she watched her son's light dim. The final straw came when Richard began serving the steaks. He placed a perfectly cooked, juicy cut in front of Sophie, announcing, Only the best for our little star. Mia and David received similar portions, their plates fragrant with rosemary and garlic. But when Richard set a plate before Lucas, Kaitlyn froze. The steak was charred, its edges blackened and curling, the center dry and overdone. Tough one for the tough guy. Richard joked, chuckling. Eleanor laughed lightly, adding, boys like it crispy, don't they, Lucas? Mia and David joined in, their laughter cutting through the warm night air like a blade. Lucas stared at his plate, his hazel eyes welling with tears he fought to hide. His small hands trembled as he gripped his fork, and Kaitlyn felt something snap inside her. This wasn't just a thoughtless oversight. It was a deliberate slight, a public humiliation of her son. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the stone patio. This is unacceptable, she said, her voice low but laced with steel. The table fell silent, all eyes on her. She snatched Lucas's plate and marched to the nearby trash can, dumping the burnt steak with a resounding thud. You don't get to treat my son like this. Eleanor's face flushed. Kaitlyn, it's just a piece of meat. Don't make a scene. Richard raised his hands, placating. It was a mistake, honey. I'll get him another one. But Kaitlyn's gaze was unyielding. A mistake? She repeated, her voice rising. You've been making mistakes for years, ignoring Lucas, dismissing his talent, showering Sophie with praise while my son gets scraps. This ends tonight. She turned to Lucas, who was staring at her, wide-eyed. We're leaving, she said, taking his hand. Ethan stood, his quiet strength a silent affirmation, and placed a protective hand on Lucas's shoulder. Mia, flustered, tried to intervene. Kate, you're overreacting. It's just a barbecue. But Kaitlyn rounded on her sister, her eyes blazing. You've enabled this, Mia. You let them treat Lucas like he's invisible because it suits you. I'm done pretending it's okay. The relatives sat frozen, some nodding faintly in agreement, others too stunned to speak. Eleanor's voice trembled with indignation. You're being ungrateful, Kaitlyn. We've done so much for this family. Kaitlyn shook her head, her voice steady now. Not for my family. Not for Lucas. As they walked to the car, the weight of her words hung in the air. Lucas clung to her hand, his voice barely a whisper. Mom, did I do something wrong? Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at me? Kaitlyn knelt beside him, her heart breaking. No, Lucas, you did nothing wrong. This is their problem, not yours. And I'm going to fix it. She pulled him into a fierce hug, her resolve hardening. Ethan opened the car door, his jaw tight. You were right to stand up, he said. What's next? In the car, the Miami skyline glittered in the distance, but Kaitlyn's mind was elsewhere. She stared out the window, her hands clenched in her lap. They need to feel what Lucas felt, she said, her voice low but resolute. I'm not letting this go. They'll learn what it means to be excluded, to be made to feel less than. Ethan nodded, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. Whatever you're planning, I'm in. Lucas, curled up in the back seat, clutched his sheet music, his quiet sniffles piercing Kaitlyn's heart. As they drove into the night, a plan began to take shape, one that would turn the tables and demand justice for her son, without breaking the law or the family apart. The dinner had been a breaking point, but it was also the spark for something bigger. Kaitlyn wasn't just fighting for Lucas, she was fighting for the truth. The Miami sunrise painted the sky in hues of coral and gold, but Kaitlyn Grace barely noticed as she stood in her kitchen, her coffee growing cold. The events of the disastrous Palm Beach dinner replayed in her mind, the charred steak, Lucas's trembling hands, her parents' dismissive laughter. At 38, Kaitlyn was no stranger to standing her ground. Her interior design firm thrived on her ability to navigate high-pressure clients and tight deadlines. But this was personal. The pain in her 12-year-old son's eyes had ignited a fire in her, one that demanded action, not revenge, but a calculated lesson to make Eleanor and Richard Blake feel the sting of their own unfairness. Ethan joined her, his 40-year-old frame moving with quiet purpose as he poured his own coffee. You didn't sleep, he observed, his brown eyes searching hers. Kaitlyn shook her head, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. I can't stop thinking about Lucas. He deserves better than being their afterthought. Ethan nodded, his gentle strength a steady anchor. So, what's the plan? He asked, leaning against the counter. Kaitlyn's lips curved into a determined smile. We're going to hold a mirror up to them. They'll get a taste of what they've done to Lucas, starting with a dinner at our place. Lucas shuffled into the kitchen, his hazel eyes still heavy with sleep. He clutched his sheet music, a reminder of the recital his grandparents had ignored. Mom, are we going back to Grandma's soon? He asked, his voice tentative. Kaitlyn knelt beside him, her heart aching at his uncertainty. Not yet, sweetheart, she said, brushing his tousled hair. But we're going to have them over here for a special dinner. You just keep practicing your piano, okay? You're going to shine. Lucas nodded, a flicker of hope in his expression, and headed to the living room, where the soft notes of Chopin soon filled the air. Kaitlyn and Ethan retreated to her home office, a sleek space adorned with mood boards and fabric swatches. She pulled out her laptop, her mind racing. "Here's the idea," she began, her voice steady. "We invite Mom and Dad for a reconciliation dinner. We serve them exactly what they gave Lucas, subpar food, cold indifference, while we enjoy the best. It'll be a wake-up call." Ethan raised an eyebrow, a mix of admiration and caution in his gaze. "Bold. But we need to make sure it hits home without escalating." Kaitlyn nodded. "That's why we're also planning something bigger, a family trip they're excluded from. They'll feel what it's like to be left out." The first step was securing the dinner. Kaitlyn called her friend Maria Lopez, a renowned chef at a trendy South Beach restaurant. Maria had catered Kaitlyn's firm events before, and their friendship was built on mutual respect. "Maria, I need a favor," Kaitlyn said over the phone, her tone measured. "I'm hosting a dinner, but I need 2 menus, one exquisite, one deliberately bad, but identical in appearance." She explained the situation: the burnt steak, Lucas's tears, her parents' favoritism. Maria's voice softened with understanding. "I get it, Kaitlyn. I'll make it work. Prime dishes for you, Ethan and Lucas. Canned soup and overcooked meat for your parents. They won't know what hit them." Next, Ethan took charge of the second phase. He contacted a luxury travel agency, booking a week-long cruise to the Bahamas for the extended family, Kaitlyn's aunts, uncles, cousins, and even Mia's family, but not Eleanor and Richard. The ship, Emerald Horizon, promised private cabanas, turquoise waters, and activities perfect for kids like Lucas and Sophie. "It's confirmed," Ethan reported, hanging up the phone. 7 nights, first week of next month. I've got us a suite for the whole crew, minus your parents." Kaitlyn's eyes gleamed. "Perfect. They'll hear about it after the dinner, when the exclusion stings most." Kaitlyn spent the afternoon drafting digital invitations, each one marked confidential, surprise element. She sent them to her relatives, emphasizing the need to keep the cruise a secret from Eleanor and Richard. Responses flooded in, many laced with support. Her Aunt Linda wrote, "We've seen how they treat Lucas. This is long overdue. Count us in." Another cousin, Mark, added, "About time someone called them out. We're with you." The solidarity bolstered Kaitlyn's resolve, but a sliver of doubt crept in. Was she crossing a line? Could she teach her parents a lesson without fracturing the family? That evening, Kaitlyn made the call to Eleanor. She stood by her office window, the Miami skyline twinkling in the distance, and dialed her mother's number. "Mom, it's me," she said, keeping her voice warm but firm. "I've been thinking about the other night. I want to move past it. Come to our place for dinner this Friday, 7 p.m. Just you and Dad." Eleanor hesitated, her tone wary. "You were awfully upset, Kaitlyn. Are you sure?" Kaitlyn swallowed her anger, channeling it into calm. "I am. Family's important, especially for Lucas. Let's make things right." After a pause, Eleanor agreed. "All right, we'll be there. It's a shame Mia and Sophie can't come." Kaitlyn smiled tightly. "Don't worry, Mom. It'll give you time to focus on Lucas." She hung up and turned to Ethan, who'd been listening from the doorway. "They're in," she said, her pulse quickening. Ethan crossed his arms, a mix of pride and concern in his expression. "You're really doing this?" Kaitlyn nodded, her jaw set. "They've had years to change. Now they'll see what it's like to be on the outside." Later that night, Kaitlyn stood in Lucas's room, watching him practice at his keyboard. The notes of his Chopin piece floated through the air, each one a reminder of his talent and resilience. She sat beside him, her voice soft. "You're incredible, Lucas. No matter what happens, I'm so proud of you." He looked up, his eyes searching hers. "Will Grandma and Grandpa like my music this time?" Kaitlyn's throat tightened, but she smiled. "We're going to give them a chance to see you, really see you. And if they don't, we'll make sure you're surrounded by people who do." As Lucas returned to his playing, Kaitlyn's mind raced with the details of her plan. The dinner would be a carefully orchestrated lesson, the cruise a bold statement. She wasn't just fighting for Lucas's pride, she was fighting for his place in the family. But as she watched her son, a quiet question lingered. Would her parents rise to the challenge, or would her plan push them further away? The Grace family home in Miami glowed under the soft light of Friday evening, its modern glass walls reflecting the vibrant hues of the sunset. Inside, the dining room was a masterpiece of Kaitlyn's design, a long mahogany table adorned with fresh orchids, silver cutlery gleaming under a sleek chandelier, and the faint strains of jazz drifting from hidden speakers. At 38, Kaitlyn moved with purpose, her dark blue dress accentuating her determined grace as she checked the table settings. Tonight was no ordinary dinner. It was the stage for a reckoning, a chance to make her parents, Eleanor and Richard Blake, confront the pain they'd inflicted on her 12-year-old son, Lucas. Ethan, 40, descended the stairs in a tailored navy suit, his steady presence a quiet reassurance. "Nervous?" he asked, his brown eyes meeting hers. Kaitlyn shook her head, though her heart raced. "Not nervous. Just focused. They need to understand what they've done." In the kitchen, Lucas, dressed in a crisp white shirt, watched Maria Lopez, their chef friend, put the final touches on the meal. His hazel eyes sparkled with curiosity, though a hint of apprehension lingered. "Mom, is this dinner going to fix things with Grandma and Grandpa?" he asked, clutching his sheet music. Kaitlyn knelt beside him, her smile warm but resolute. "We're going to show them who you are, Lucas. You just be your amazing self." Maria, vibrant in her white chef's coat, emerged from the kitchen with a confident nod. "Everything's ready, Kaitlyn," she said, her voice low. "Prime dishes for you, Ethan and Lucas, this special menu for your parents. They'll look identical, but—" She trailed off, her eyes glinting with understanding. Kaitlyn squeezed her friend's arm. "Thank you, Maria. This means everything." The plan was simple but surgical. Serve Eleanor and Richard the same substandard treatment they'd given Lucas, a cold, canned soup appetizer and a charred, inedible steak, while the rest of the table enjoyed a gourmet feast. It was a mirror to their favoritism, a lesson in empathy through experience. The doorbell rang, slicing through the jazz. Kaitlyn took a deep breath, her pulse quickening, and opened the door. Eleanor, 62, stood in a beige dress, her pearl necklace catching the light, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. Richard, 65, in a gray suit, held a bottle of wine, his silver hair neatly combed. "Good evening, Kaitlyn," Eleanor said, her voice measured. "We're glad you invited us." Kaitlyn accepted the wine with a polite smile. "Welcome, Mom, Dad. Come in." She led them through the living room, where modern furniture and abstract art showcased her success. Eleanor's eyes widened. "My, this is stunning," she said, almost to herself. "You've done well." Richard nodded, peering out at the garden view. "Smart investment, too." Lucas appeared, giving a shy wave. "Hi, Grandma, Grandpa," he said, his voice soft. Eleanor's smile was stiff. "Hello, Lucas. You're looking grown up." Richard patted his shoulder absently. "Good to see you, kid." Kaitlyn clapped her hands lightly. "Shall we?" She guided them to the dining room, where Ethan and Lucas were already seated. The table gleamed, the atmosphere warm but charged. Kaitlyn poured wine, raising her glass. "To family," she said, her voice steady. The clink of glasses echoed, but the air crackled with unspoken tension. Conversation started cautiously. Kaitlyn steered it towards safe topics, asking about Mia and Sophie. Eleanor's face lit up. "Oh, Sophie's thriving. Her ballet teacher says she's a natural." Kaitlyn nodded, her hand resting on Lucas's shoulder. "That's wonderful. Lucas won first place in his school's piano competition last week." Eleanor and Richard exchanged a glance, their surprise evident. "That's nice," Richard said, his tone flat. Kaitlyn's jaw tightened, but she held her composure. The stage was set. Maria and her assistant brought out the appetizers. Before Kaitlyn, Ethan, and Lucas were vibrant plates of smoked salmon gazpacho with arugula, the colors vivid and the aroma divine. Before Eleanor and Richard sat bowls of cold, canned vegetable soup, a greasy film floating on the surface. Eleanor's spoon froze midair. "What is this?" she asked, her voice sharp as she compared her bowl to Kaitlyn's plate. Kaitlyn shrugged, her tone casual. "Oh, just some soup I found on sale. It's edible, right?" Richard frowned, poking at his bowl. "You're eating something else." Kaitlyn's smile was serene. "We got the special appetizers. Don't worry, the main course is coming." Eleanor took a tentative sip, grimacing at the metallic taste. Richard pushed his bowl away, his face reddening. Lucas ate quietly, his eyes darting to his grandparents, sensing the shift in the room. Kaitlyn exchanged a glance with Ethan, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. The appetizers were cleared, and Maria delivered the main course. Juicy, perfectly cooked steaks, drizzled with herb sauce and paired with roasted vegetables, landed before Kaitlyn, Ethan, and Lucas. For Eleanor and Richard, the plates held blackened, shrunken cuts of meat, their edges charred and hard. Eleanor's fork clattered against her plate. "This is outrageous," she snapped, her voice trembling. "What's the meaning of this, Kaitlyn?" Richard's eyes narrowed, his voice low. "This is deliberate, isn't it?" Kaitlyn leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. Yes, Dad. This is exactly what you served Lucas 2 weeks ago. Burnt meat. Laughed off as a joke. How does it feel? Humiliating? Worthless? She reached into her purse and placed an envelope on the table. And this is the next step. Tickets for a family cruise to the Bahamas. Everyone's invited, except you. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling. You're excluding us? Richard stared at the envelope, his face a mix of shock and dawning realization. You're punishing us. Kaitlyn's voice softened, but her words cut deep. You've excluded Lucas for years, ignoring his music, praising Sophie, giving him scraps. This is what it feels like to be left out. Lucas, his voice small but clear, added, I just wanted you to listen to my piano. His words hung in the air, raw and piercing. Eleanor's tears spilled over, and Richard sank into his chair, his bravado gone. Kaitlyn stood, her heart racing but her voice steady. This isn't about cruelty. It's about truth. You have a chance to change, but it starts with seeing Lucas for who he is. She nodded to Maria, who brought out new plates, identical gourmet steaks for everyone. Let's eat together, as a family, for a fresh start. But know this, until you treat Lucas with the love he deserves, you're on the outside. The room was silent, Eleanor's sobs the only sound. Richard reached for the new plate, his hands trembling. Kaitlyn watched them, her resolve unshaken but her heart heavy. The lesson had landed, but would it take root? Or had she pushed her parents too far? The turquoise waters of the Bahamas sparkled under the midday sun, the Emerald Horizon cruise ship cutting through the waves as laughter echoed across its deck. Kaitlyn Grace, 38, leaned against the railing, her dark hair catching the breeze as she watched her 12-year-old son, Lucas, at the ship's outdoor stage. His fingers danced across a portable keyboard, weaving a vibrant melody that drew cheers from cousins, aunts, and uncles. For the first time in years, Lucas was the center of attention, his hazel eyes bright with joy. Kaitlyn's heart swelled, but a quiet ache lingered. Her parents, Eleanor and Richard Blake, were absent, left behind in Palm Beach to reflect on the lesson she delivered at the dinner. Ethan, 40, joined her, his arm slipping around her waist. He's in his element, he said, nodding toward Lucas. Kaitlyn smiled, her voice soft. He deserves this. No shadows, no comparisons. The cruise had been everything she'd hoped, a celebration of family, with Lucas at its heart. He'd snorkeled with his cousins, built sandcastles on private beaches, and performed impromptu concerts that left relatives in awe. Kaitlyn's Aunt Linda pulled her aside one evening, her voice earnest. You did the right thing, Kaitlyn. Lucas is a gift, and your parents needed to see it. The support from her extended family was a balm, but Kaitlyn couldn't shake the question. Would her parents change, or had the dinner pushed them too far? Back in Miami, Kaitlyn posted photos from the trip on social media, Lucas grinning against a backdrop of turquoise seas, the family laughing under palm trees. The caption read, Family is love, support, and second chances. #Bahamas Memories. Each like and comment felt like a small victory, but she knew Eleanor was watching. Her mother had called several times during the trip, leaving voicemails Kaitlyn hadn't yet answered. The silence was strategic. She wanted her parents to feel the weight of their exclusion, just as Lucas had for years. But as the days passed, a flicker of hope stirred. Could they learn to see her son's worth? A month after the cruise, Kaitlyn stood in her kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through Lucas's latest music scores. He burst in, holding a new composition. Mom, this is for the school talent show. It's inspired by the ocean. Kaitlyn took the pages, her eyes tracing the notes. It's beautiful, Lucas. You're going to blow them away. Ethan appeared, ruffling Lucas's hair. Another masterpiece. We need a bigger wall for all your awards. The doorbell rang, cutting through their laughter. Kaitlyn frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Ethan glanced at her, his expression cautious. I'll check, he said, heading to the door. He peered through the peephole, his posture tensing. It's Eleanor and Richard, he said quietly. Kaitlyn's stomach churned. She hadn't spoken to her parents since the dinner, and the wound was still raw. Lucas looked up, his excitement fading. Should I go upstairs? He asked, his voice small. Kaitlyn took a deep breath, her resolve steadying. No, stay. This is your home. She turned to Ethan. Let them in. As the door opened, Eleanor and Richard stepped inside, looking older, more fragile than she remembered. Eleanor's eyes were red-rimmed, her beige cardigan slightly rumpled. Richard held a manila envelope, his hands unsteady. May we come in? He asked, his voice low. Kaitlyn nodded, leading them to the living room. The space, with its modern furniture and Lucas's framed music awards, felt like a testament to her family's strength. She crossed her arms, her tone cool. What do you want? Eleanor's voice trembled as she spoke. Kaitlyn, we've been wrong, terribly wrong. We saw your photos, heard about the cruise. It hurt, being left out. And then we realized that's how Lucas has felt all these years. Richard cleared his throat, opening the envelope. We wrote this, he said, pulling out a letter. For you, Ethan, and especially Lucas. He began to read, his voice thick with emotion. Dear Kaitlyn, Ethan, and Lucas, we failed you. For too long, we favored me as family, showering Sophie with attention while overlooking Lucas's incredible talents. We're ashamed. The dinner you hosted, the cruise we missed, it showed us the pain of exclusion, the pain we caused Lucas. We started family therapy to understand our mistakes and change. We promised to be better grandparents, to celebrate Lucas as he deserves. Please give us a chance to make this right. Eleanor's tears fell freely now. We want to apologize to Lucas in person, she said, her voice breaking. Kaitlyn glanced at Ethan, who gave a subtle nod. Lucas, she called softly. He descended the stairs, clutching his music sheets, his expression wary. Eleanor knelt at his level, her hands trembling. Lucas, we're so sorry. We didn't see how special you are, your music, your heart. Can you forgive us? Lucas studied her, his young face serious. After a moment, he asked, will you come to my talent show? And really listen? Eleanor nodded, tears streaming. Every note, I promise. Richard managed a shaky smile. And I'll bring the best steak. Lucas, no burnt ones. Ever. Maybe I can even teach you to grill. Lucas's lips twitched, a tentative smile breaking through. Okay, he said softly. Kaitlyn felt a warmth spread through her chest, the anger she'd carried for so long beginning to ease. She looked at her parents, her voice firm but open. This is a start, but it'll take time. Show us you mean it. Eleanor and Richard nodded, their faces etched with regret and determination. Months later, the Blake family was transforming. Eleanor and Richard attended therapy weekly, unraveling their patterns of favoritism. They showed up to Lucas's talent show, sitting front row, their applause the loudest when he played his ocean-inspired piece. Eleanor hung his music scores on her fridge, next to Sophie's dance photos, and Richard began teaching Lucas to grill, their laughter filling the Palm Beach backyard. Mia, initially defensive, softened as she saw her parents change. I've been too focused on Sophie, she admitted to Kaitlyn one day. Let's make it fair for both kids. At the next family dinner, the table was alive with equal affection. Eleanor baked cookies for Lucas and Sophie, and Richard proudly displayed Lucas's latest award. Lucas and Sophie performed a duet, their piano and dance blending in harmony. Kaitlyn stood by the garden, Ethan's hand in hers, watching the scene unfold. Sometimes truth hurts, she whispered, but it heals. Justice had prevailed, not through vengeance, but through a lesson that rebuilt her family stronger than ever. As the sun set over Palm Beach, Kaitlyn felt a quiet triumph. Her plan, the dinner, the cruise, had forced her parents to confront their flaws, but it was their willingness to change that sealed the victory. Lucas, now confident and cherished, played a new melody, his notes carrying the promise of a brighter future. Kaitlyn knew the scars would linger, but they were healing, stitch by stitch, through love and accountability. The Blake family was whole again, and this time, everyone had a seat at the table.